To get someone from overfat to normal body, that's what we do. We just...
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm here with Bart Kay. That's Professor Bart Kay for anyone that doesn't know. And there he is, right there, wearing his beautifully themed yellow fleece. Not a garment, not a towel, not a dressing gown, guys, not a robe. Anyway, we're going to be talking today about fat loss plateaus, how to get past them, different contexts. All the viewers out there are wondering, you know, what do I do from like this, want to get to that, or like this, want to get to that. So today we're going to invent a fictional character. His name is going to be Teddy Bear. So this teddy bear is, let's say, 30 years old. There is. Lovely to see you. Very good.
Could you please to be 30?
Yeah, I think he's older than that, isn't he?
He is. He's 52, 53.
Yeah, he's an old timer now. He's about double my age. Better take him more seriously then. He must be much wiser than what I thought. Anyway, so the hypothetical today is, but we've got a gentleman or woman, either 20% fat for a male in terms of body fat, and 30% body fat for a female, maybe 35. How are they going to get from that point, which is on the, in my opinion, the outside range of a healthy body fat, or slightly elevated maybe, down to maybe 10% if they're male, maybe 25% if they're female, assuming they want to go from no abs to abs? How are you going to do it? And if they got any plateaus that they come across along the way, what would you do?
All right. Well, first of all, we have to apply the first law of thermodynamics in it, and we have to count all the heat units. Yes, and we have to count heat units. That's what we do. And then
absolutely
magically somehow, just counting heat units will mean that you'll lose fat off your body, because it's actually a magical incantation. So it is. All you have to do is say, it's just thermodynamics, isn't it? That's what you have to do. Nothing else, just that. And anyone that says otherwise just doesn't get it, and they're dumb. Or on this planet, in the reality that we actually find ourselves in, where today I shall be mostly wearing this yellow top, as you say, what we actually need to do is concern ourselves not with units of heat, nor actually with measurements of energy in any form, or even estimations of any of those things at all. What we need to do is make sure that the makeup of what we eat is correct for our speciation. Most of us are human beings. One of us is a small yellow teddy bear, but he's a breatharian, so that's okay. So what we need to do is we need to eat what a human being should eat. And if we do that, then the amount of that stuff that we eat will also be self-controlled, if you like, self-managed by this funky little thing that's evolved over, something like at least 13,800 million years, it seems. Because people say, life only evolved on this planet about 4 billion years ago, to which I say, well, where do you think it came from? Do you think it just spontaneously popped up on this planet? Or do you think it was delivered here? I think it was delivered here. So I'm going to say it's about 13.8, assuming that that's about the age of the universe, given the anthropic principle. However, there is now talk that the universe might be actually twice that old. Don't know. Anyway, long time. We have this thing, it's called hunger. And it's this message our brain sends us and says, you're hungry, eat some meat and fat. And then when you've eaten enough meat and fat, your body says, you know what? I'm quite full now. That's enough. You can stop. So what we do is we listen to those two, so long as what we put in is either muscle meat or associated fat, hopefully of large ruminant animals mostly. Other animals up to 20%, bits and bobs, just for a bit of variety and to give the cows a break, really. Do that for a long enough period of time, and a person's mass, in terms of their fat mass, will normalize over time as per their genetic design. That's pretty much the program. Yeah. To get someone from fat to normal body, that's what we do. We just eat the right stuff, rinse and repeat for long enough. There are several other hacks there are several other things you can throw into that program as well, other than the diet. There are, 4 other things actually that are on my list of things that I always suggest to people. However, if you want to know more about the other 4, you can find out about that on my fine YouTube channel. There's a video called 5 Life Hacks or something like that, and it's got me on the thumbnail going like that.
I'll chuck it up on the screen around here somewhere as well, guys. So
awesome. And what that does is it shows you that there's 5 of them, and you can see the palm of my hand, which apparently makes me more trustworthy. So there you go. That's what I would do in that situation. Real straightforward.
It's also a good way for us aliens to fit in, to start emulating the, the palm actions and the smiles and the...
Live long and prosper.
That's the one. Yeah, I'd completely agree. I think, largely speaking, the average person that comes to a carnivorous diet, if they just eat to satiety, the meat and animal fat, they'll get to the end point that they want, which will be a lean, healthy body fat. There is some margin of deviation in terms of what that person's set point would be. So for me, my set point is probably realistically about 15%, where I've just about got faint abs, but I'm not shredded. That's my set point where I train best, feel best, my hormones best, sleeps best, all that sort of luck. There's other people the other end of the spectrum where they're very lean and they maintain leanness and their hormones are fine, they feel great, end of story. The eating satiety, they're not starving themselves, they're not doing a Thomas DeLauer using certain substances to maintain leanness, which is very obvious at this point to me, as someone that's seen it all, been there, done that. Now, there's going to be obviously a subset of people that will have food addiction, in which case I would highly recommend subscribing and looking at Bart Kay's partner's channel, which is Pim Johnson. And it's, what is the channel name again?
It's called Food Freedom. Yes, because she keeps changing it every year or so. Yes, that's one of those things. Food Freedom. Pim Johnson, Pnsson, as in Swedish Johnson. It's Johnson with an A. So don't look for Pam Johnson. You won't find it. Her name's not Pam Johnson. It's Pim with an I, Pim, Johnson with an A, Jansson, and you'll find her.
I think you guys are pretty cool. It's just a shame you're the other side of the planet, which is a bit annoying. And I can't travel that I physically cannot travel that far. And things are happening at the moment which prevent you from coming over here. Plus, the interest in you coming over here would probably be quite slim. Given the certain genders going on right now. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. But yeah, I do come across a lot of people with food addiction issues, carbohydrate addiction, ultra processed food addiction. You know, it seems very obvious to me that some people just have to deal with that. But I think a lot of the time, not always, but it can be due to themselves. So what most people will do that I work with, I'll say, you know, you want to go strict carnivore, you want to get all these benefits, right? This is the best practice. It's the best thing you can possibly do right now to achieve a goal, and it's going to be largely what you've just said.
Introducing Beef Up Carnivore Bodybuilding Bible, the ultimate guide for men and women to lose fat and build muscle. And the best part, Carnivore, it's only $12. Don't miss out on the most detailed resource available. Get your copy now at compositionconsultant.com.
The issue is they'll keep these things in the cupboard, this almond flour, these sweeteners, these erythritol, whatever you want to call it, and they'll start baking these keto goodies and things like that. And I think that is a distraction, and it prevents you from getting your goal. And I see this time and time again, people start baking all these massive amounts of food, and whenever it says keto on it, it means basically, I'm going to destroy your gut microbiome, whether you like it or not, and I'm going to put loads of ingredients in here which don't serve you at all. Probably a bit better than eating a Mars bar, but it keeps that sweet taste. We know what happens with the sweet taste, the insulin secretion, and that addictive behavior, which just seems to come across all the time. Which is pretty funny, because we do see the Maasai and, you know, tribes people going absolutely off their nut when they have honey and fruit and stuff. They enjoy it because it's addictive. That's the way it is, where sugar is addictive in its default form, I guess. So
Check out my site at compositionconsultant.com, where your journey to peak performance and optimal health begins. With a degree in human nutrition and over 15 years of training experience, I've guided more than 400 carnivores to not just meet, but exceed their physique and performance goals. Through personalized consultations, comprehensive ebooks, and dedicated coaching, I'm here to ensure your success. Join the ranks of those who have transformed their lives. It's time to align your physique goals with positive health outcomes.
yeah, we've kind of covered the getting from overfat to in a reasonable shape, leanish. Now, let's take the average person that is, say, an athlete. Maybe their name's Bartholomew Kayson, for example. I don't know. And now they're at 10% body fat.
Jesus, that'd be great.
They're looking pretty well.
That'd be awesome.
They're looking pretty well. Yeah, they're having a splendid time. They're on the carnivore diet. They're doing well. Their protein is, reasonable. Their fat's reasonable. They're not doing consecutive weeks of protein-sparing modified fasts, all that sort of thing. They're at a steady state. They're maintaining abs, about 10% body fat. Now, how is that person? Now, I understand this is not a health implicated approach. It's not something you deliberately do for any reason other than bodybuilding physique competition. How are they going to get from 10% body fat with abs to shredded out their mind, veins all over their ass and wigglies all over their head?
Right.
So how are they going to do? How do you think they're going to do that?
Well, look, I think there are several approaches there that a person can take if there is a desire to be shredded, either for athletic purposes or competition purposes. Maybe you just want to pull, something like that.
Yeah.
You can do this. Realistically, in my mind, I think a person can maintain a shreddedness for short periods, and then they should let it go. Go back to that 10, 12% for men and 15 to 17, 18% for women. That's where you should be. That's where you should do most of your training. If you're going to be training, that's where you should exist most of the time. That's where your body is most comfortable, as Jonathan has already quite eloquently outlined. So this shreddedness is for a season, for a period of time, for a specific purpose, and it ends and you stop it. But to get there are several approaches. The first approach is to count all your heat units and use more of them. Still doesn't work, but it's still absolute nonsense, rubbish.
Well, so you read the labels in the shop on the packages.
Yeah.
It says 100 calories. So if an average man burns 2,500 calories per day, what you want to do is subtract 2 of those items each day for a week. Then it eventually gets to a point where it's 500 of those points, those calorie systems. Yeah. Then it works out to be a pound, apparently.
Fantastic. Awesome. That'd be great if it worked. It doesn't. Yeah. For most people, at most times, it's not going to work because, well, the reasons why calories in, calories out is absolute, utter nonsense, hogwash and rubbish. I think I've covered more than enough depth already on my fine YouTube channel. There's a playlist called CICO is Nonsense or something very similar to that. You can watch all of those videos to your heart's content and giggle away with me, because once you've seen 2 or 3 of them, you'll understand and you'll get how nobody else seems to for some reason. Anyway, so don't count anything. That's the first thing. No counting, no singing, and no counting, apparently, are the rules. Here's what I did once to get relatively shredded. I never got shredded, but I got, to the point where you could clearly see abs on me and stuffs like that. And it was quite impressive. I did 2 weeks of priming, which I'll explain in a minute. And I followed that 2 weeks of priming with about 3 months minus 2 weeks of intermittent fasting, which I'll also explain in a minute. So there's 2 bits. The first bit as to, what is this priming? And the second bit is, well, what's this intermittent fasting? Right. So priming is this. Instead of my normal 1 meal a day, 3 meals a day, plus snacks in between. Instead of eating until I was full and felt like I had enough food in me, I actually packed in as much food as I could possibly get in. I was full up to rifting. To gunnels, I was full up. And it was horrible. And it was unpleasant. And by the end of 2 weeks of doing that, I felt like, if I never see food again in my entire life, that'll be just fine, thanks. Obviously, that's not how things really are, but that's how it felt. It was like, this was a struggle. This was really quite punitive to do. To give you an idea of that, for those of you who are still stuck in the heat units mentality, we're talking about me having so-called consumed, which is physically impossible, by the way, but having consumed something like 6,000 to 6,500 of these K heat units every day, 14 days solid. During which time, because of calories in, calories out, I obviously became obese by eating 3 point something times my normal intake of food, which actually didn't occur. I'm being facetious. I lost weight while consuming so-called 6,500 so-called calories. How does that work? Well, it doesn't. It's another reason why the things is nonsense. But anyway, I did that. Why did I do that? Why on God's green earth did I do that? Well, I did that because what that does is it makes damn sure that your body has everything it needs going forward to be a happy chappy, or a happy chappy-ette, if you're a happy chappy-ette. Yes. It gives you everything you need in spades, on hand, in your body, ready to go. So there are no deficiencies. It's highly anti-inflammatory to do this. And inflammation is one of those things that can interfere with your body composition, wreck your gains. It can make you soft. It can cause you to hold fat and water that you don't need and make you look puffy and whatever else and hide your abs and stuff. So I ate until I was stupid. So that didn't take long. 2 weeks it was. And then I was stupid and full of stuff and things, and lighter than I was before I started doing it. Don't forget that. And then I did the rest of 3 months, 90 days it was actually, to be exact, where it was intermittent fasting. And now a lot of people think of intermittent fasting as just eating once a day, having a window. That's intermittent fasting, they say. Rubbish. That's not intermittent fasting. That's just not eating for most of a day.
That's normal diet, which most people should probably be doing, roughly.
Right, exactly. Right. So to me, intermittent fasting is like periods of fasting that last, 72 hours for me is when fasting is occurring. Up until then, it's just not eating, in my mind. The reason that I have that particular distinction is because, the benefits of fasting, the draining of glycogen that you is causing you to hold weight. It's the autophagy thing. It's the immune system reset thing. It's all of those things. They all kick in around about that stage, really. But you don't just go straight to doing 3-day fasts. I did a week of rolling 24s. Eat one day, not the next. Eat one day, not the next. Then there was a week of eat one day, don't eat 2 days. Eat one day, 2 days. So that was over a week. But that was the theory. And then the rest of it was just like the 72-hour fasts followed by 72 hours of refeeding to satiety without pushing any food in. Priming's done now. We don't have to push food in. We just eat till we feel full. And at the end of that 90 days, whereas when I started that, I had bloat. I had the classic dad bod shape with the apple, the round guts. I'm still on pipe cleaners these days because I'm not as active as I was. I don't train the way I used to when I was a much younger man. I'm literally stood on pipe cleaners. It's quite comical. It really is. And I had this round gut, and the upper body development is what it is. It's what you can see from the camera right now. That didn't change. But what happened over the 90 days is that round gut, that distension, that disappeared completely. I took up a normal upper body shape, normal for a much younger man. And you could see abs very clearly. I can show you photos of that if you want to see them. And that's what happened. And here's the good thing about all of that. Not a jot of exercise was involved.
Yeah, exercise is a small margin of what you can achieve. I mean, if you want to be heavily muscled, yeah, you'll have to implement that as well. But say someone is like, okay, I want to, drop a pound in a week. What's the best way to do it? Alter your diet 80% or increase your training by 80%. The diet is probably 80 to 90% of that lever in terms of fat loss. I've noticed at least. So it makes sense. Yeah.
The other problem with exercise that I find is that people inherently overtrain.
Absolutely.
At whatever your level is athletically, you will tend to overtrain at your level, which actually is not helpful. More is not better. And even more than that is even not more betterer. Again, it's worse. The thing with the mentality of those that are in the exercise field, training, teaching others, whatever, those who claim to be experts in exercise physiology, most of whom are not, in fact, actually, but that's for another day. They'll tell you that volume is key, volume is king, and more volume is better, and even more volume is even better than that. And when that doesn't work, because it won't, it's just because you're not doing enough. More still is required. Absolute nonsense, rubbish. What you need to do to get the results from your training, from your exercise, is to up the intensity and reduce the volume. It's about minimum effective exposure in the way you would think about a drug. What is the minimum effective dose that we can give someone that will have the effect that we want of this drug? And let's say that's the dose that we suggest people take. We don't go around and say, well, look, 1 aspirin does this, so why don't you just take 700 aspirin? There's a good reason you shouldn't take 700 aspirin, because that will fucking kill you. In the same way that exercising 7 times as much as you should by way of volume will also kill you, but first it will destroy your gains on the way to doing that. So get your intensity right, and your intensity should be maximal every time. There are no easy days. There are no easy runs. That's just exercise. That's not training. That will not help anything except your ability to do volume, which you don't need to do. So don't do that. Sorry, rant over. Yes, good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, for anyone that's listening to this now that doesn't know, Professor Bart and I have been collaborating, chatting online for about 1.5 years or so, probably more. And the very first thing I said to him in the first interview was that I found recovery was the bottleneck in terms of improvements in physique athletes. I've noticed this every single time. It's always, I can't sleep well, which will then impact diet, which will impact, your ability to adhere to a sensible diet, then impacts your strength. If you wake up the next day and your grip's like weak, you wake up, you think, I've got no go, I'm going to have a coffee. Well, that coffee is then going to stimulate AMPK, which is then going to increase the cortisol and all that sort of stuff downstream. And you're not going to sleep as well, therefore you're not going to recover. So you're just getting back to square one over and over again. So what was actually interesting...
You'll get cross.
Absolutely not. No, I like a bit of coffee sometimes. But yeah. Yeah, and what I actually noticed was my recent contest prep. There's one point, Bart, where I was training over, I think it was maybe a 2 to 3 week span, where I think it's 2 week spans, 14 days. I only trained 3 times. As in, I went to the gym. In terms of everything I was doing, that was physical activity, resistance training, whatever, it was 3 training sessions. And during those 3 training sessions across that 2 week span, I actually improved the most. And you can see that in the evidence between I believe it's the 2 week out photos and the 5 week out photos. The improvements were the most drastic. My sleep improved, my inflammation dropped, I started to get more definition in like key areas. So for anyone that doesn't know, bodybuilders are always concerned about the lower back and the glute area in terms of like being shredded. Those are the last places to come in. All that tucked right in. So there's obviously something to do with me being inflamed, overtrained, and then getting some damn good sleep and recovery on those, rest days. That actually accelerated my fat loss process. It doesn't seem to make sense, but it kind of debunks the energy balance model, but it does promote, however, the mass balance model. I've actually got a chart here, which I may be able to show on the screen. If I can't do it, I'll screenshot it and put it above. But basically, you might be able to see. But that's basically my nutrition tracker, because I'm obsessed. I've been doing it for like 10 years now. And what you see is, I think it's the green line or blue line on the screen is actually the it's the weight that I had. So I started at about 111 kilos, dropped down to something like 91 or something. I don't know. But what you'll see is that orange, like zigzaggy line was my energy intake, or supposed labeled food calorie intake. What you'll see is actually increased over that time, but my weight drastically dropped by something of the order of like 20 kilos. So that kind of debunks the calories in, calories out model, in my opinion. And lots of people have done the same thing. Professor Bart Kay, I know you've done the same thing with your experiment with the priming. Now, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of priming, not because it doesn't work, but I think it's not worked for a lot of people that I've worked with. So obviously, I'm focused around carnivore diet, bodybuilding, fat loss, muscle gain, that sort of thing. And most people come to me say it's been ineffective and it's actually caused them more problems than it's solved. There are some people that have had more benefit than not, obviously, because it's a tool. For a lot of people, the tool just hasn't been effective in my experience. But what I will say is my preference is to use something like a leptin reset or a reverse diet, where someone incrementally increases their food intake, becomes more aware of like sunlight exposure, blue light exposure, all that sort of biohacky stuff. Yeah. Increase the protein and fat, especially in the first meal of the day. It seems to be effective, seems to have some science around it, seems to be anecdotally quite sound from my experience. But I've been getting people to do like a reverse diet with a leptin reset sort of thing. Then I've been manipulating the macros, and I'm finding people over time, when they get their recovery sorted out. So what I usually do with most people, anyone that's worked with me knows, I try to get people healthy first, feeling good, sleeping well, training hard, but not gaining body fat. That's not the point. What I notice, I'll be like, drop 10 grams of fat per day. So go from 160 to 150 grams of fat. They'll drop like a pound that first week. And it's like, okay, well, let's just run the same thing again. So I give people a plan, they run the plan, and it will be quite effective. I would say, exclusively speaking, this is people that are trying to go from 10% down to shredded, like 4% body fat, which is extremely hard. So there is an element of calculating, because I think sometimes the human mind, I mean, if you said to me when I'm 4% body fat, eat animal fat and protein to satiety, I'll be eating like 6 kilos and I wouldn't even feel satiated. And when you're that lean, you do not feel satiated until you eat to your body fat's set point. I've noticed this time and time again. So that's why it's easy to binge after a show, because no matter how much you eat, you may be full, you may be nutrient satiated, but until that fat is on your body and your body is at a stable sort of level, you just don't feel good. Your appetite just goes up and up. So I'm at the point now, in reference to the context that I'm speaking about, so contest preparation. I'm about 7 weeks post-show. My next show will be the British finals, and that'll be in about 12, 13 weeks' time. So what I've basically done is a very gradual reverse diet. So any steps I was counting, anything like that, any training that I dropped, I'm basically just bringing things back up to where they were at maybe like the 5-6 week out mark, finding that body fat percentage where I feel good, train good, and can sleep well. Then all I'll do is drop it back down again. So I'm basically doing a zigzag with almost like a periodization of my training and that sort of thing. Now, if anyone wants to know about my training, that sort of stuff, I've got a playlist on my YouTube channel. Contest Prep is the title. But also, I'd like you guys to leave a comment below if you'd like to see Bart Kay and I do a collaboration to talk about my training plan as a carnivore bodybuilder. So what I'll do is I'll chuck it on the screen. I'll talk through it, session 1, 2, 3, 4, my rationale for it. Then I'll obviously ask Professor Bart Kay for his experience and opinion on it. Anything I could fine tune or optimize. And if he thinks it's good, great. If he thinks it's not good, also great. It means I've learned something. So that'll be useful for you guys to sort of work out what I'm doing, because a lot of people ask what I do. But some of the input that Bart Kay will give you some context, give you some extra additional valuable information, which you can use to sort of tailor your training plan. So he'll give you some keynotes and thoughts, which I'm sure will be really helpful. Now, I'd say, largely speaking, dropping body fat for me has been very difficult when you're limited in the amount of output you can do. So But I know you're more of a fan of like manipulating diet more so than, you know, like cardio or training, volume, that sort of thing. At what point would you say to someone in their contest preparation or whatever they're trying to do, don't drop the food intake any lower? What markers would you look out for? Is there certain objectives or blood tests or something you'd look at and think, that's the point, okay, you can't drop your food anymore, you have to increase your step count, you have to do something else? What would that be?
Right. Eat less and move more? At what point would I suggest that?
Mantra.
Right. At what point would I? Yeah.
So how would someone get leaner? Say for example, me, my off season was 350 protein, 350 fat or more, something like that. Now, say I dieted down and say my protein was 350 protein and 120 fat. My body's not dropping in my body fat. My body's slowed down. I'm not sleeping well. I'm hungry as fuck. What would you do?
Well, for the most part, the most important aspect in terms of what your body composition will do in the next period of time depends very much on what the balance of various hormones are and your inflammasome, what's that doing and whatever else. These imbeciles, these buff heads who say it's all about how much energy you take in and how much energy you spend, the ICO, or, you know, any variation on that, they are missing the entire point. The point is your metabolism has, for want of a better term, forward and backward gears in terms of gaining of fat and loss of fat. The same is true of muscle independently. The same is true of your water balance, somewhat independently. The way to get your body to change shape from what it is to some other shape is to pull the right levers hormonally, inflammasome-wise, etc. Get it to dump off any extra fluid it's holding for inflammatory purpose, to dump off any stored layer of subcutaneous fat is there because of inflammation and not because of how many heat units you consumed, and to do the right things by yourself that way. Also, we need to look at your recovery with respect to your training. Do you have sufficient and effective recovery? Because at the end of the day, getting better from training is what happens when you recover from the training. Nobody ever walked out of a gym fitter than they walked into the gym that day. That doesn't happen, does it? No. What happens in the gym is you tear your body down a bit. You damage yourself mildly, moderately. Now you need to have your body recover from that, repair itself better and stronger than it was before, so that next time you go to the gym and do that same thing, it's not such a stress on your body, by the way, which means you then need to change your program to keep your body guessing. All right? So those are the things I'm always focused on. In terms of your food intakes, the things that I'm invariably focused on is the makeup of your food correct for any given human being. In other words, is your protein intake roughly 2 grams per kilo of lean mass? Plus or minus, individual difference, sure, a little bit, but is it somewhere in there? Too much protein, gluconeogenesis, inflammation, fat storage. Too little protein, no raw materials to build muscle with, stall, fat instead. Too much fat, same deal, you're going to store it. Not enough fat, you're not going to have the energy to do the training. So let's get that right first. 2 grams of protein, and the rest of your intakes is fat to satiety. And your satiety will change day by day based on your expenditure, your training, your activities of daily living, your stress levels, all sorts of stuffs. So rather than telling a person eat less volume of food, first of all, I'm looking at how it's made up. Now, we might find that they're eating too much food by getting a recall on, okay, well, how much food are you eating? What are you eating? How's that made up? That's too much food. But I'm hungry. Well, why is that? Okay. So we go through that way rather than the first level of control is how much food you're eating, because it isn't. It's about what your body is doing. And the signs that we'll look at for, a problem would be signs of inflammation. That's a dead giveaway. Now, also, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, Jonathan, before we started recording, you showed me some bloods that you had taken recently where there was some signs of inflammation, right? So that doesn't mean you're chronically doing the wrong thing, though, because you told me that those tests were taken just after you did a comp. So right after you've just finished a comp, your body's not going to be in the best shape, because to get competition ready for bodybuilding, you basically have to put yourself into a very stressed situation, which is one of the reasons why I don't think it's a great sport. hey, all power to you. I
largely agree. I'm just nuts. That's my justification. And that's what you say, but isn't it? You say, anyone that does this is absolutely off their mind. I'm like, I personally wouldn't do it. I just give people a way to reasonably do it somewhat in a safe manner. But don't try to emulate me, which is when people ask what I do. I'm like, what I do is different to what you do and what you need. It's always a case-by-case basis. If anyone's listening to this at this point, they're wondering, this doesn't answer any questions to me. Book a consultation with Bart Kay, book a consultation with me. You'll find a bottleneck somewhere in what you're doing with no issues at all. We've done this a lot of times. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah. So pretty much that's it. I mean, I'm not going to, first of all, go to food volume. That's going to be the last thing I look at, unless it's really obvious straight away. I'm eating 500 grams of protein. I am. Do you mean 500 grams of meat? No, I mean 500 grams of protein. I'm having 2 kilograms of meat every day. So I am. And how tall are you? Oh, I'm 5 foot nothing, and I weigh 100 pounds. Well, that's too much food for you. That's why you're fat. Is it? Right. I mean, those kind of things are easy. For the most part, though, most people are not that straightforward. It's not that obvious. It doesn't smack you straight in the face. That's why you haven't worked it out for yourself yet.
Yeah, we have to chat to you guys. The amount of times I've sat in consultation with someone, they're like, how much meat do you eat a day? And they'll say, a pound or two. Well, that gives a massive margin of error. That's twofold more food. If one day you're eating 2 pounds, was it one? It doesn't tell me much. So really, we need to work out 50, 100 gram sort of increments, really, just to be quite sure. Also, is it cooked or is it raw? I know you can you explain quickly the meat portion that you recommend? So say a 100 kilo man, 10% body fat roughly.
Right. So a 100 kilo person who is 10% body mass, 10% body fat is ostensibly, basically, pretty much, you could call that person a lean individual, and you could use their actual body mass. By the same token, someone that has a huge amount of hypertrophy and has a lot of muscle, you wouldn't use their ideal weight based on a BMI. You'd use their actual weight.
Because it becomes scrawny.
Right. Exactly. So, basically at the end of the day, what I'm suggesting to a person is roughly 2 grams of protein, kilo of lean mass, ideal mass or actual mass, if you are already pretty much lean. That will give you the number. So a 100 kilogram person with basically no body fat to speak of at 10%. Okay, 100 kilograms. So 100 kilograms times 2 is 200 grams of protein that person should take in a day. Preferably in one meal.
That's not meat, guys. Not meat.
That's not the meat weight. No, that's the protein weight. To get 200 grams of protein from raw meat, doesn't mean you have to eat it raw, but I'm saying raw because it weighs differently when you cook it, for God's sake.
Yeah.
When it's raw, the weight of that will be roughly 4 times the 200. It'll be about 800 grams of meat, raw, which you can then cook to your heart's content, even well done if you like, and no, that won't destroy all the nutrients and leave you deficient in vitamin C or any fucking thing else. All right? Or you can eat it raw if you want to do that too. It's your funeral. You do you. I don't like raw meat personally. I think it's fucking horrible, but you do what you want. But anyway, that's how you work out how much it is.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah. So, for say, 100 kilos, 200 grams of protein per day. Bart and I actually probably have the same recommendation for fat intake as a starting point. So we've always said before, the protein is relatively stable up or down a little bit. But the fat is largely what moves around in terms of being the bigger lever for fat loss, fat gain, all that sort of thing. So I believe in kind of 1-to-1 for most people as a start point, or unless they can specify to me what they're doing before that, in which case I work from that point, obviously. But are you of the same mind, like 1-to-1 protein to fat?
I generally tend to avoid even applying a ratio or it should be this
because it doesn't say what the individual amount is.
That's right. It changes up and down for a person, any given person, day by day, based on what the needs are. So what I say to a person is get your protein right, because that doesn't move much. So 2 grams per kilo of lean mass. Then the rest of your intake is fat, either that which is already associated with that meat or additional if you need additional, but you stop eating when you feel full. So you prioritize the protein, and the fat is what makes up the rest, however much the rest is, until you get that message where your brain goes, that'll do now. You can stop.
Fun fact, Proteos means the first in Greek etiology. So it's very helpful. So yeah, I absolutely agree.
Good.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. But we'll look to do another collaboration soon. We'll talk even more in depth about this. So anything we haven't answered in this, guys, leave a comment below. We can go into a bit more context.
Check out my site at recompositionconsultant.com, where your journey to peak performance and optimal health begins. With a degree in human nutrition and over 15 years of training experience, I've guided more than 400 carnivores to not just meet, but exceed their physique and performance goals. Through personalised consultations, comprehensive ebooks and dedicated coaching, I'm here to ensure your success. Join the ranks of those who have transformed their lives. It's time to align your physique goals with positive health outcomes.
If it's a question like, oh, my name's Bob, I weigh 42 kilos and I'm 6'1" and I want to drop 2% body fat and I take these supplements, what do I do? That's a consultation question, guys. So give us broad, general questions we can answer that will apply to the most amount of people, because ultimately we want to help the most amount of people get on a species-appropriate diet and get the body composition outcomes that they want.
Yep.
Brilliant. We'll leave it there, guys. Thanks very much for joining. And also thank you for Professor Bart Kay for joining. And also Yellow Ted, who you may have to pay his appearance fees.
He was here before. I don't know where he's got. I don't know where he's got to. Ted, you were not seen at the camouflage training. Ted?
Never mind.
You can't do a thing with him.
Cheers. Take care, guys.
Build muscle and lose fat on the carnivore diet. Introducing Beef Up Carnivore Bodybuilding Bible. The ultimate guide for men and women to lose fat and build muscle. And the best part, it's only $12. Don't miss out on the most detailed resource available. Get your copy now at compositionconsultant.com. Build muscle and lose fat on the carnivore diet.